Good morning. Welcome to the Policy and Resources Committee meeting held on the 30th of January 2025 at 7 o'clock. I am Councillor Darren Thomas, the Vice Chair of Policy and Resources. I'll be chairing this committee today. Start with the apologies for absence.
Yes, Chair, we've got 3 apologies from Councillors Eddy, Moss and Ralston, but I see we're missing Councillor Tom Renhard, who may join us as we're going along. So 3 apologies at the moment and maybe 1 more councillor to join us.
And the emergency evacuation procedure?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members, colleagues, we're not expecting a fire alarm drill today. So if the fire alarm does actuate, it will be for a real event. So therefore, if you can exit the room using the signed exits and follow the fire escape signs, and then we will congregate at the front of the building where we'll undertake a roll call. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We've received no declarations of interest, but if any members have any, please make it known. Thank you. We've had no requests for public access. I welcome you all to this meeting, as I have earlier in this meeting. Good to see you all. Thank you for making it. As I've said, the Policy and Resources Committee is taking place at Severn Park. We'll be recording this meeting for the public to view on the Fire Authority YouTube channel. I am Councillor Dan Thomas, Councillor for Congsbury and Puxton on North Somerset Council and Vice Chair of Policy and Resource Committee. Can I ask members to introduce themselves, starting with Councillor Murphy?
Councillor Ron Hardy, Councillor for Emerson's Green in South Gloucester.
Cam Hayward, Councillor for Knoll in Bristol.
Councillor Paul May, I'm a Councillor for Pensford and Whitchurch and the Paynes Councillor.
Good morning, I'm Robert Payne, Councillor for Weston-super-Mare Central on North Somerset Council.
Thank you, members. Can I ask the officers to introduce themselves, starting with Richard?
Good morning, members, colleagues. My name is Richard Welch, Assistant Chief Fire Officer.
Good morning, members. Simon Shilton, Chief Officer, Chief Exec. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Amanda Brown, Clerk and Monitoring Officer to the Fire Authority.
Good morning, I'm Verity Lee, Statutory Finance Officer.
Good morning, Amber Foreman, Director of Corporate Services.
Good morning, Paula Lyons, Temporary Assistant Chief Fire Officer.
Good morning, Emma Bowen, Democratic Services.
Tanya Nathan, Procurement and Supplies Manager.
Morning, everyone. I'm Ian Potter. I'm Head of Service Transformation.
Morning, everyone. My name's Tom Luxon, and I'm the Head of IT.
Thank you, officers. Amanda?
Can I just make a quick announcement? I think I've mentioned this to most people, but we do have Tom Luxon here, our Head of IT, who has very kindly offered to help members with logging onto the new iTrent system for your expenses and your payslips, but also the new member SharePoint site. So please, I really urge you not to leave the room until you're connected on both those systems. Some people have come to me and said they've achieved it. I think 4 or 5 out of the 20 members, so Tom will help you. And if we can't fix it today, at least we know there's an issue and we can follow up on it. So thank you very much, and thanks, Tom, for that.
Members, just a note from myself. On behalf of Avon Fire and Rescue Service and Avon Fire Authority, we were saddened to hear of the death of Geoffrey Lovell. Jeff began his career as a firefighter at Bedminster Fire Station in 1974 at the age of 23, and he rose through the ranks during his 3 decades of service. Jeff retired from the service in 2005, but remained as a councillor on Avon Fire Authority for many years. He'll be greatly missed by those who had the pleasure of working alongside him, including his many friends from across the service and also in local government. And I'd like to invite members and colleagues to stand for a minute's silence in remembrance of Jeff, please. Further announcement, members, just as a gentle reminder, on the 27th of December, we launched a 6-week consultation to understand the views of our local people, communities, businesses and wider partners on progress towards our service plan for 2024 through to 2028, as well as how much residents will be prepared to pay for their fire and rescue services within their council tax. The feedback will help us assess how we are performing against our plan, manage risks effectively, ensure the service provides excellent value for money and making sure the service is a great place to work. We need the support of all members to help us share the consultation as far and wide as possible to ensure we reach as many residents as we can during our consultation period, which concludes on the 7th of February. The links are available across the service's social media channels, on the website, and leaflets are being distributed in the community. And I'd like to encourage members, when they see those links, to share them amongst your networks. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Can I remind members?
Chair, can I just ask, I chair the Health and Wellbeing Board in Baines. If you could actually get that statement to me, I'll make sure it's read out at the next meeting, which is next week.
Thank you. Can I remind members and officers to put their phones on silent, please, particularly members? Can I remind attendees to use their microphones when speaking and to turn them off when they're finished to reduce feedback? Can I also remind members that if any voting is required, it will take place by members raising their hands. It will be any votes against, any abstentions, and then any votes for. Thank you very much. Moving on to the minutes from the Policy and Resources Committee held on the 1st of October 2024. Did anyone have any amendments? If not, I will move the minutes and request a seconder. Thank you very much, Councillor May.
Can I just confirm that's both the open and exempt minutes, so that members happy with both? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, members. Moving on to agenda item 7, which is service improvement, and that is Ian Potter.
Thank you, Chair. So the report before members today is an update of the progress against service improvement activities. I'll start my presentation, if I may, at paragraph 5.13. All of the information preceding that is the background to service improvement and the governance arrangements. So if I can just take you back to the HMI CFRS revisit in September. They were here for a couple of weeks in the early part of September. The outcome letter for that was published on the 24th of October. An update was presented to Fire Authority on the 6th of November. And I've put a link into the report to that update as by way of background. That paper also included a summary of the status for each of the causes of concern and the areas for improvement. So, moving on to 5.16 and the mobilising software. The outcome at the revisit was the cause of concern and the associated recommendations were all closed by HMI. The improvements that we implemented as part of that will now continue as business as usual, so it wasn't just something we put in place for a period of time. The strategic oversight reporting will continue along with the user group and the risk escalation routes. So this won't feature in future reports. It's closed. I don't think we need to report on that in future, which is fantastic. The site-specific risk information, there's no dashboard for this one because the actions have been completed. At the revisit, 2 of the 6 recommendations were closed, and I've referenced those there. Work is continuing on the remaining 4 recommendation actions. The lead action owner for this cause of concern provided an update to Improvement Board on the 21st of January. And the board members there spoke very positively of the huge progress that's been made since that cause of concern was issued. And the remaining areas of work are very much in train, and that's around identifying further premises that require a visit, the information that is then available to our fire control team, the speed of uploading the information into the recording system, and the management of temporary risks. In terms of prevention, you'll see there that there are only 5 actions that aren't yet complete. They are all in train, they are all on track. They cover home fire safety visit quality checking and some residual training. That's all very much on track. The training is almost at 90% of staff now. And we'll pick up those remaining people through various means. This quite lengthy training. Each of the training sessions are a day long, so when we get to very small numbers, it becomes impractical to then pull those people together. But we will make sure that that it is covered off. 3 of those recommendations were closed, and those remaining activities are around those that remain open. But as I say, again, good progress being made there, and the responsible manager also attended Improvement Board on the 21st of January to give a presentation on the progress, and again, members of the board were very impressed with the huge progress that's been made on that one. Moving on to culture, you'll see there that we have 27 actions that are complete, 4 are on track. One of the actions is currently off track. That is around some joint working and joint comms with the unions. The work behind all of that has been completed. We're just waiting for the new intranet to be launched, where a lot of that sort of information will be available to staff. From the next PRC meeting, Karen Schill, our culture change manager, will also come along to meetings in future and present a more detailed update on our culture change journey, not just around the HMI actions, but more generally. Moving on to the areas for improvement, again, you can see the progress that's been made there since the last update to members. There are now only 3 actions that aren't started. We've got roughly 50% of them are now complete, and the balance in general are on track. The ones that are off track and are at risk are in a table. It says paragraph 5.49, that should read 5.54. My apologies for the change of reference there. And within that table, you'll see the update from those action owners as to where they are with those presently. Moving on to the Spotlight Report, Values and Culture, there is only 1 action outstanding for this one. This relates to fire standards, so there's 2 particular fire standards, leading the service and leading developing people. We do have plans in place and they are underway. It's in 2 phases. The first is around a gap analysis, so that's looking at what we already do in terms of meeting those outcomes and where those gaps might be. And then the second phase is obviously looking at what those gaps look like and what more we need to do. So whilst we have plans in place, we've decided that we're going to keep the action open until we're into that second phase. Moving on to thematic review of the handling of misconduct in fire and rescue services. I think the most important thing to update on there is that the dashboard shows that there are 7 actions that are not started. Since writing this report, some updates have come through, and I can confirm that all of those actions are now in progress. So we have the 6 on track, we have 4 complete. The 6 that were on track have gone into complete pending assurance, and the 7 that were not started are all now in train. And again, the culture manager will give some more detailed updates in future PRC meetings about this, alongside all of the other culture work we're doing. Just touching on fire standards more generally, we've got 19 fire standards in total, covering a broad range of topics. The gap analysis that we're working on is across all 19 of those at the present time. Fire standards are really setting out what a good fire service would be delivering in terms of those outcomes, and it does link in with the HMI CFRS characteristics of good. So as we work through the fire standards and looking at where we are meeting those outcomes, it's also identifying where we're doing well for HMI and vice versa, so they very much work hand in hand. The other thing that I wanted to just mention is that at the last meeting we talked about the intention to carry out some deep dive reviews on the completed actions. Subsequently, we've looked at the volume of those, and the way we'd intended to do it is going to be impractical. So what we're doing now is looking at an alternative approach with action owners and the responsible managers that will deliver it in a different way, but still will deliver on those outcomes that we wanted. So that's just around the assurance of that. Moving on to transformation, members will be aware the programme is close to its end now. You can see from the dashboard that we've got 9 work packages are complete, 9 are on track. There are some that are off track, and again they're in the table at 5.54. 2 of them, you'll see some updates there. 2 of them, it says that there are discussions about where they will go post-programme. Those discussions have taken place, and they will be transferred out to part of our culture activity over a slightly longer period. The 3rd one is around the intranet project. There's been a short delay in terms of the launch while the team do all of the quality assurance work, just to make sure it's ready for go live. So it's off track, but only by a few weeks. And that launch is due to take place next month. Yeah, next month. Moving on to efficiencies and savings. If I can start here at 5.44. So this was around the options presented to the leadership board for review in December. SLB identified a set of preferred saving options that fit in to the medium-term financial plan and our strategic priorities. Proposed savings options were discussed at a member briefing on the 17th of January, and a full report will be going to Fire Authority on the 14th of February. In terms of the specific changes that we're looking at the moment, you recall the introduction of a flexible rostering system for whole-time staff at Yate. The trial commenced on the 1st of January. So far, the transition to that new shift system has been smooth, with minimal disruption and good adaptation to the new duty pattern. Obviously, it's still very early days while people get used to that. As part of that trial, the station's establishment has been reduced from 14 to 12 grey book staff, and that's where that tangible efficiency gain is secured. The 2 posts have been redistributed to other areas of higher priority in the service. The second piece of work here is around the Firewatch software. Significant progress is being made in delivering the Firewatch app. We're a little ahead of schedule in some of the areas with earlier delivery of some of the modules. Initial testing has commenced, and the Train the Trainer programme is scheduled to start around about now. And also to support that transition, we're going to do some data cleansing to make sure that when we move to Firewatch, all of that information is good, clean, quality data. In terms of the exceptions that I mentioned at 5.54, you'll see there that there are some actions that were in the exception table at the previous meeting that have now been completed. They're in that list of bullet points there. And then below that are the actions that are at risk or off track, and the comments from the action owners there. And then just in terms of risk, we did a deep dive review of the corporate risk for improvement work, and in particular the risk event failure to improve our judgment at the next inspection. There was a request made to bring that back to the SLT once the outcome of the revisit was known. A report was brought before SLT yesterday with a proposal to reduce the risk from a score of 18 to 13, and that was based on the progress that we've made already, the actions and recommendations that have been closed by HMI, and the ongoing activities, and that was approved by SLT. So that's reduced it. The main bit there was around the impact. It is less likely, but it was that impact, looking at the impact descriptors, where we think that that risk score has reduced. We won't actually obviously know until we get the round 4 inspection report exactly where we are with that. And that's the end of my presentation, so I'm happy to take any questions that members may have.
Thank you, Ian. So this report is for scrutiny, so members, any question? Councillor May?
Chair, thank you. Can I just register, I think this is the most positive report we've had at the Policy Committee, and, great credit to everybody. I'm particularly concerned because around when you have a HMI inspection, that then goes down through the whole organisation and makes everybody feel insecure. And I think particularly at the front line, it's important that we register that the HMI inspection is important to the organisation, but it's also that we actually value the frontline staff that are working and everybody else in the organisation, because it's a difficult time, but I think this is a really positive report. The one question I've got is around the trade unions, and as a policy committee, is how do we actually get more information around what the issues that the trade unions are on about, because I think it is one of the key issues about making sure that we take everybody with us. And the other thing is that the last challenge was around, we've got our plans, we've implemented our plans, are they actually working? And I was pleased to hear you say that we're now actually doing, if you like, a deep dive to make sure that's actually working. So a really positive report, thank you.
I think Richard's going to...
Just on the trade union aspect, we have got a very good relationship, certainly with our Fire Brigade union members. I know a couple of them are here today. We do have regular keep in touch meetings, and we have regular negotiating committee meetings. And outside of that, I think it's fair to say we have quite a good informal relationship. We will contact each other by phone if we need to. So I can assure you that we do try and work as close as we can with the Fire Brigade union.
Thank you. Ian, was there anything further to add? Brilliant. Any Councillor Payne?
Yeah, I just wanted a bit of clarification, if I may. Firstly, I totally agree with what Councillor May was saying about the positive report that we've got. But I was just looking at this, the bit about the culture and the one item that's off track regarding collaboration with the FBU. Are you saying that once the intranet is being launched next month, then that one item which is off track will be resolved, or can be resolved?
Yes, so this particular action, there's a number of aspects to it. One is about the working together part in terms of messaging and that kind of thing. As as Richard has said, that work is already in place. There's very good relations. This is specifically about that shared space on the intranet. So once the intranet has been launched, that's the place where we'll have some space on there for unions, and it's not just the FBU, it's also for the other corporate side unions as well. And it's a place where we can share messaging, but it's the collaboration work is already happening. That's already going on. This was more specifically about that joint comms.
I think the Chief would like to add.
It's about, we looked at this yesterday, actually, strangely enough, and sort of scrutinised where we were with this particular action. We're about 90% complete. Reason why it says off track, it's missed its expected delivery date. And there's the remaining elements, as Ian has articulated there, is around that shared space on the intranet, our internal communication network, so we can have an area where we have joint messaging right the way across the workforce, both from union representation and also those that aren't members of a union across our workplace as well. So that's more the collaborative element. So it's just that little bit of element, the delivery mechanism that needs to be completed, and that's linked to the launch of the new intranet at the moment. So that's why, and it's just missed its date because we've taken some time to get the internet right in relation to engagement and what it looks like, etc.
Thank you. Anything further, members? Oh, Councillor May.
Sorry, can I just ask that it's not clear in the report when the next inspection is going to take place. Have we got any indication when that's going to be?
So, so HMI have recently published the framework for the next round of inspections. They've indicated that that programme will start in June. If the inspection programme runs in the same order as it did in the last round, we think it will be around September, October. I know from conversations with our service liaison lead at HMI that the training for the next round takes place in April and May. So within a couple of months, I would anticipate we would have an indication as to when it will actually start for us.
Councillor May, just in response to that, there are two elements in terms of visits. So we have regular revisits, pre-planned revisits to visit our progress against our past report, so the presentation that you received today. We haven't got anything in our diaries. They haven't indicated a revisit date. But we do have I have regular touch point meetings with HMI, and on the 11th of February, as a senior leadership board, we've got a further virtual checkpoint meeting as well, which will start again to verbalise the progress to date. So that's one aspect. When they physically come back into the organisation to look at these elements, they've not declared that. But there is another round, as Ian's articulated there, another fresh round, which is sector-wide, not service-specific, sector-wide, starting in the autumn of this year, with a new round of inspections looking at existing topics, but new additional topics as well in relation to governance, which will then be a separate report that will be issued on each individual service. So there are two different avenues here. If you're referring to about a revisit on our progress to date, we haven't got anything in the diary because they haven't declared anything yet.
Yes, I was mainly interested about, you've got a new government, new themes coming through. Are we picking up what those themes are going to be? Because we might close off all of these and then find there's another lot that come along. So it was really, in policy terms, do we know what's coming and are we preparing for it?
Yeah,
in the same way as we are for this.
Sorry, Councillor. Yeah, it's an interesting one because there is a little bit of slight difference in the next round of inspections, which is going to give some new activity. We're very conscious of we want to be able to close all of these before we get some potentially new recommendations or whatever that might be, what it looks like. We hope we'll be able to demonstrate some positive progress, and we're also focusing on a couple of the new areas. So Ian referenced about fire standards. That's going to form the basis of some focus in the next round of inspections of how services are implementing the fire standards. There are 19 of those, and Ian's articulated in the report around some of the most important areas that we're focusing on. They're also going to be looking at leadership at every level of the organisation, and that links to one of the fire standards and how leadership development takes place and also applied in the workplace. Another new area of focus is around governance, and that area of focus for the HMI is how does governance support the delivery of services through to the communities in its operating mechanisms within the service, not necessarily the governance structures, but how we as a service ensure appropriate governance is in place. So some big topics, some new ones, as well as some existing diagnostics that they will keep focusing on as well.
But sorry, I'll shut up in a minute. But I mean, in terms of governance, obviously, as councillors, we come from our local authorities, and we should be a part of that process. So, at some stage, probably at the next policy committee, can we actually see what that actually means for us? Because it is, you know, we are all part of the authority, but it's how can we be more effective? Because I saw the criticism, if you like, last time about we've got the plans, but we haven't checked they're being implemented. I thought that was a direct, I don't know whether criticism of us in terms of our scrutiny of what's going on. So I think we would gain by having a little bit more information about what you expect from us.
Yeah, there is some outline guidance around what they're going to be focusing on. It's quite loose, it's not specific, but what they're focused on in terms of governance. And I think it will be more focused in what is reported into the authority. Are the right things being reported to the authority in relation to legislative responsibilities and the platform to enable scrutiny to take place, and how that then assures delivery to find improvement within the service. I'm not sure whether their intention is to engage directly with councillors because there are different governance structures. I think it's more about the next level down around how do you facilitate good governance as a service into whatever that governance architecture looks like, is my understanding. But certainly we can provide you with the narrative that the Home Office, the HMI have provided so far to try and give you some insight. So.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, members. Councillor May.
Yes, because I mean the one thing we never actually see is the work that goes on in the community, which I think I've seen is really important to communities, and we don't really see a lot of that, but it is important that the commitment we've got from the front line of working in the community is absolutely superb, and I think we should be proud of that work.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian, for your report. So we have a recommendation. It's the Policy and Resources Committee is asked to note the content of the report and make any recommendations or suggestions as it sees fit. Thank you very much. Moving on, agenda item 9, which is approval of the fleet strategy. Our head of fleet, Matt Derrick, is unfortunately unwell today, so thank you very much to Assistant Chief Richard Welsh, who will be presenting this report.
Thank you, Chair. Members, I'm presenting this day asking for approval of the Fleet Strategy 25 to 28. It's the strategy has been written following the appointment of our new Head of Transport and Technical Services, Matt Derrick, who, as the Chair said, is unwell and can't be with us today. It is a new document unrelated to any previous strategies. It's been completely written from scratch. The financial implications around the strategy mainly consist of the capital costs associated with the service's fleet replacement plan, with a small amount of additional capital costs to improve the back office IT structure. It is important to note that the funding required within this paper has already been based on within our medium-term financial plan. The reference to the back office infrastructure changes, it allows us, as an organisation, we need to gather speed to improve our data collection. around our fleet. And that's what the change in the infrastructure within our fleet department will do, will allow us to be much more data-driven around our database decision-making. A good example of that is due to the data that the head of transport has already collated. He's already got a plan in place to possibly extend the 15-year life of our fire appliances by maybe changing the ones that are less used for ones that are more used on a more regular basis. The strategy details what is required to modernise the fleet department. As I say, the priorities with that is the digitalisation of processes, which will ensure the decisions we make in the future are informed, while also highlighting areas for continuous improvement. The digitalisation process will start immediately, and the goal is to have new systems and processes implemented by March 26. And then further processes will be completed. Planned completion date for the full system integration will be March 27, so well within the lifespan of this strategy. The majority of the strategy is the bringing in of best practices to the department, and with the right people in the right roles can be accomplished well within the 3-year time frame. The strategy is attached as Appendix 1. As I say, I am covering this format, but I'm more than happy to take any questions you may have around the strategy if I can help.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you for stepping in kind of late notice as well on this item. Councillor Hardy.
Yeah, Richard, could I just take you back to para 3.3 on the background, and it's only really a bit of a point of order, but we've said due to being able to locate any previous fleet strategy. I suspect that should read unable. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Hardy. I'd highlighted the same line as well. Yeah. Councillor Hayward.
So just to clarify on that point, does that mean we have had previous strategies but we just can't find them?
Hopefully the digitisation of the process will, will improve our retention of these policies. Any further questions, members? Councillor May.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just, I think the policy behind looking at the vehicles that we've got and the ones that are most used, because there is, quite a difference in the use, is really appropriate. But it's whether for various stations you then do comparisons between various stations for that type of use, and it's whether you then can actually in fact be looking at the nature of all the vehicles that we've got, as opposed to individual decisions being made.
Yeah, absolutely. Part of that, in the overview, part 1, the assessment of current fleet, what Matt Derrick is doing now is have we got the right vehicles, with the right risk and the right need in the right area.
You put that better than I did.
Yes. But yeah, that work is going on now, and part of that data collection would also give us those answers, the sort of incidents they've attended over the last 2 or 3 year period. What was that vehicle? What equipment? And even down to, we can now identify what equipment has been used for each incident. So how is that equipment carried? What vehicle is it on? Is it on the right kind of vehicle?
So when we purchase a new vehicle, the equipment, which is really quite enormous for various vehicles, is that covered in the capital costs, or are they revenue costs in terms of making sure, or do you take all the equipment off of an old vehicle and put it on the newer vehicle?
The vehicle, when we buy a new vehicle and new equipment, that's capital cost. But just to go, in addition to what we're talking about there, we're doing a piece of work at the moment called our blended fleet, which is looking at, do we need the same size fire engine at every fire station? Is that the right piece of equipment for that risk area? But yeah, anything to do with the fleet replacement as far as vehicles and equipment will be a capital cost.
Thank you. Councillor Hayward.
So under the assessment of current fleet, point 1 is about compiling a vehicle inventory. Do we not already have that in some form, or is it just about digitising that?
we do have it, but yes, first of all, it is about digitising. But what we haven't really always kept a record of, what equipment on that inventory do we actually use? So we got some equipment on some of our fire appliances in certain stations that may not have been used for 5 years. So do we need to be carrying that equipment on that vehicle? And that's the digital data, the data collection that Matt Derrick is doing. Because if we can take a piece of equipment off, it might mean that our stowage on our vehicles is so precious that if we can take something off that isn't being used, we might be able to take on that we do need. And that's the sort of digitalisation.
Thank you. So our recommendation for this is for this committee to consider the fleet strategy of 2025 to 2028 in Appendix 1 and approve for publication. So we do require a vote. So I propose that we consider and seek a seconder. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hayward. So any votes against? Any abstentions? And votes for? Thank you, members. So moving on is agenda item 9, which is the 2024-2025 Revenue Budget Monitoring Report as of the 30th of November 2024. And Verity, you'll be presenting.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is a regular update report that we bring to this committee. It's reporting on the first 8 months of the current financial year and then using those actuals to predict the outcome for the full year. There's one appendix to this report which is included on page 65, and that appendix gives a breakdown of the budget variations we're seeing against each line. The first point within the cover paper I wanted to just cover was point 4.1 at the bottom of page 59, and that just highlights the full year forecast outturn that we are expecting to see based on the numbers up to the end of November, and that's an underspend of just under £80,000 for the year ended March 2025. If I can move on to section 5 of the paper, which starts at the top of page 60, and I'm just going to pull out some of the key movements really that we're seeing in various lines of the budget. So the first section there is on income, and that very first paragraph just confirms really that the two top lines of income from local government and central government, and then from the council tax, really we don't receive that in 12 equal instalments. So the assumption is we're still going to be in line with budget for the full year, so there's no variation on those two. But if you try to look at the fact that 8 months of the year, the 8 months of the year doesn't quite tally to what you'd expect 12 months to be, so it's just pulling that point out. Paragraph 5.2 covers other lines of income, and we're seeing around a £300,000 over recovery on income, and that's across two lines. One is the investment income, where interest rates have stayed higher than we expected, so we've generated around £200,000 more in terms of investment income on our cash balances. And the other line is in other grants and income, where we're around £125,000 over budget. There's various things within that line, and I've mentioned a few there in the paragraph, but we've already had income of around £150,000 within that pot, so we've just prudently assessed that we think that will come in around £200,000 for the full year. Moving on to the costs, I'll pick out just the big movements within employee costs, which obviously we know are the larger or the majority of the costs that we incur as a service. So paragraph 5.4 talks about whole-time firefighter pay costs. This is very similar to the underspend that was reported to this committee in October last year. So we're reporting around just under £300,000 underspend for the full year. The way that we've budgeted for whole-time firefighter costs is based on established positions. So we are assuming that all established positions are filled for the full year. What happens in reality is that we have vacancies, and we obviously then have less costs incurred because of those vacant positions. We then call on overtime to kind of backfill those vacant positions, but what we see is that the overtime costs haven't fully offset the underspend we've seen on vacancies, so that's why we're reporting a slight underspend there. On-call firefighter costs are talked about in paragraph 5.5, and actually they are coming in broadly in line with budget, but it's because we've seen a slight underspend in terms of year to date based on lower call-outs than expected, really just slightly different assumptions in the budget than what's actually happened. But there is a new on-call firefighter pay agreement that started from the 1st of January 2025, which is increasing our pay cost slightly on the on-call side. So this forecast outturn includes that increase, which offsets the underspend that we've seen year to date. So there's 3 months of that higher pay for this financial year. Moving on to paragraph 5.7 and corporate staff costs, we're seeing an overspend against corporate staff costs of around £250,000. There are a few roles that we have now that were not, well, they've been created since the budget was set, so they weren't there as part of the budget setting process. Some of those costs can be allocated to the £440,000 HMICFRS budget that we specifically put aside to help deliver against our action plans. You'll see if you look at Appendix 1 on page 65 that we haven't reported any actual year-to-date spend against that pot of money. That's because we've left the costs up within employee costs, for example, and other areas where those costs have been incurred rather than moving them down. That paragraph also talks about if we can continue to mitigate the overspends that we're seeing as a result of the HMI costs coming through in various cost lines against other underspends that we're seeing, we can potentially use that pot of money for some other upcoming service priority. And what would reality would be if we do end up not needing to delve into that pot because of other underspends, we'd likely contribute it to reserves at the end of the year. But we'll continue to monitor that as the year progresses. The final thing I just wanted to mention then is in paragraph 5.11 and the other costs. And the line that I particularly want to talk about was the £125,000 of savings. So when the budget was set for 24-25, in order to balance the budget, we needed to reduce the cost by £125,000. So the budget was set with costs of £125,000 more than the income that we were expecting. What we've seen as the year progresses is we've seen underspends in some lines, overspends in others, but actually we've been able to drop that savings requirement. So we're saying that for based on the information and the outturn so far year to date, we've generated sufficient savings in other areas that we don't have to specifically identify anything further. So if you looked at the appendix on page 65 again, the second to last column is the full year forecast, which has a £79,000 underspend for the year, and you'll see that the efficiencies line of £125,000 is nil within that column, so we're saying we don't need to make any savings against that line anymore because they've been generated across various other lines within the budget. And I think that's all I wanted to say on that one, so happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Verity. Any questions, members? Councillor May.
I feel embarrassed. I seem to talk on everything, Chair. Thank you. Can I just ask it's an operational question more than a financial question, I think. The whole time firefighter pay. In health, you have bank workers and agency workers, but if you're sending out a vehicle with less people on than they should be having, isn't that a real risk to the employees? And under those circumstances, is there a mechanism where you mentioned about overtime, but if there's not the number of people there, there's a risk for the frontline staff? And it's just me understanding how that actually works, please.
Yeah, sure. So we have a standard and minimum crewing levels. Okay. We bring the overtime into effect when we go below the minimum crewing levels required. So that's when that thing. So we've got the bare basics that we need. What we also do then is obviously then look at globally across the service where we might supplement resources, as in might send another appliance as an example to an incident. So you've got that right level of resourcing at that particular, whatever that scenario is for that incident. So we manage our resources a little bit more flexibly, if you like. So we look globally across the service, then we look locally, and if we go below that minimum, that's when overtime gets enacted and we go up to the minimum. And we also have what's called a degradation plan as well. So if we haven't got enough people, it's based on risk, and there's a degradation plan where we start to adjust our resources for that particular day or that particular night for that period of time. So there's a number of different layers to that, Councillor.
Not just restricted to the fire station. If that happens, I think what you've indicated is you would pull a vehicle in from another area where it's fully staffed. You don't move staff from one area to another.
We do all of those things. So yeah, we do move staff around the service area where there's staffing deficiencies and somewhere might have spare personnel. So we do that as well. We call that detached duties, and they'll move around. That's mainly for whole-time firefighters. So we wouldn't do that for on-call firefighters, as an example. And then if that doesn't level up the resourcing and keeps us at either our standard crewing or our minimum crewing, it's that when we use other mechanisms to try and bring that crewing level back up again. And then so let's say, for instance, we have a station that is riding has got 2 fire appliances that has 4 firefighters on each appliance. giving a minimum of 8 available if it's an incident that requires 2 fire engines. Then we might well bring another fire engine to that incident to give some more resources to be available to deal with that particular scenario.
So the obviously question that follows on from that is that then perhaps affects the time of attending various fires.
It all depends on the location, but we do have a key performance indicator against our attendance standards that we've set as an organisation. There's no national attendance standard, and we have the first appliance on average in attendance within 8 minutes, and we're averaging around about, it fluctuates a little bit, but we're averaging around about 6.5, 7 minutes to every incident at the moment. So that's how we monitor our attendance times.
Thank you, Councillor May. Councillor Payne.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you could just explain about the overspend on the control room staff. Are you saying that we were previously understaffed and that was covered by overtime, and now that's been mitigated by 2 new members of staff? Is that correct?
I believe so. So I think we had to call on overtime quite significantly in control, and 2 new members of staff have been recruited in the last few months. So hopefully that need to call on overtime is reduced. So that overspend shouldn't grow, I think is the message here. So that overspend, obviously, for the first part of the year, it has happened, but...
Our establishment level for fire control, it's only a relatively small team, so those fluctuations. And therefore, because you haven't got such a greater pool of people, if you get kind of sickness as an example, either short-term or long-term sickness, then we pull from the existing team to backfill that arrangement to reach our standard crewing levels in fire control. So again, that fluctuates, but it's not at the point where we're understaffed in there. It might be for other reasons, as I said. So for example, there's a sickness or secondment for a little piece of work that they might well do, which takes them away from the shift system, and we might backfill that through overtime as well.
Yeah, it did just strike me that because it is a small team, as you say, that 2 new additional members of staff is quite a significant increase.
It is, and we have regular recruiting for fire control, so you have people, members of fire control that are in various stages of their career development, certainly in the first 2 years, and that can be a challenge to manage that, but we distribute that down at different watches as well. So yeah, from a percentage level, it does seem quite significant from a percentage level, given the starting point with the numbers of staff we employ in fire control.
Thank you. Councillor May.
Thank you. Can I? It's around the income and the grants. Are those grants one-off grants, or would they be? Because we'll be discussing the future budgets and the manning of vehicles and things like that. Is that actually a good thing, or is it just helping us this year?
Some of them will recur, but some of them we're not certain that they will. So some of the things I mentioned there, like income that we get from solar panels and things, we will continue to get that, but that's relatively small. Some of the things that are around recharges and recoveries, that all depends on if there's a secondment arrangement with the NFCC and things like that. So they may not recur. A lot of the income there within other grants and income, if it's grant related, tends to be relatively small. It's kind of a pot of everything. So rental income we get from part of our Nailsea fire station, for example, relatively small, that will recur, but it's relatively small. So we will assume a little bit of recurring other income in the budget, but we probably won't assume at the level that we've had this year because it's not certain.
Thank you. Ask another question. NI, does that affect us?
Yes. Yeah, so we were originally led to believe that we would be fully funded for the increase, and we're now led to believe more like 50% funded. So when we come to budget setting, I'll talk about that, but there is an impact for us now. We are going to have to fund 50% of that increase going forwards.
I think that was covered in our briefing on 17th of January as well, wasn't it? So,
we went through it in a lot of detail in the briefing.
Thank you. Anything further, members? No? Wonderful. The recommendation here is for this committee to note the actual spend and the 4-year forecast spending position against the 2024-2025 revenue budget shown in Appendix 1. Thank you very much. Moving on to the agenda item 10, which is 2024-2025 capital programme updates as of the 30th of November 2024, to include quarterly update on Prudential on the prudential and treasury management indicators, which is again Verity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, so paper 10, starting on page 67. Again, this is a regular update paper, so we're bringing you an update on the capital programme spend up to the end of November, and then how we think that the full year outturn will look as well based on that information. We're also looking at the updated extract of the balance sheet as at the 30th of November and a review of the indicators. That will be the second time that we're bringing that to this committee. But I'll start with the capital programme. So the first appendix of this paper, which is on page 75, gives an overview of where we think the current year of the capital programme is likely to end up. So we had approved a capital programme of just under £5.5 million for this current financial year. We've spent just under £1.5 million of that up until the end of November, and we're forecasting to spend just under £2.7 million for the full year. So the variance there of around £2.8 million. If I move on to paragraph 5.1 of your bundles, that really just highlights that 2.1 million variance isn't an underspend. And it isn't where we are not doing certain capital projects anymore. It's around rephasing of spend, so it's just to do with timing. So that 2.8 million will be considered when we set the budget and look at the capital programme for the coming years to make sure that, so we're not reducing overall capital programme is the main message to take from that paragraph. If I move on to section 5 and just looking at the key movements, just to pick out a few of the main ones. So premises is our most significant part of our capital programme. We had a budget for the year of 2.8 million. So far, year to date, we spent just under £1 million. The majority of that on the Bedminster refurbishment, which has now been completed. There's a small contingency payment still to be made, but that's the majority of the spend year to date. And there's around £200,000 of spend on kind of smaller premises works across the estate. There is a quite significant rephase of spend against the capital programme, so against the premises element of the capital programme. So we're expecting to spend just under £1.5 million, so rephasing about 1.3 million. And paragraph 5.2 just highlights the two main areas that rephase is occurring, and it's around the Bath project, the rebuild of the Bath station. We're rephasing around £550,000 into future years, just due to timescales on that. And rephasing around £800,000 in relation to on-call. There's 4 on-call fire station improvement works that are planned, but there's been slippage on those. So those are expected to happen in 25-26 as well. I'll move on to fleet. So that starts at the bottom of page 68 and paragraph 5.3. So fleet is our second largest element of the capital programme. We had around 1.5 million expected spend for this year. So far, year-to-date spend is actually quite low. It's only just over £150,000, and the majority of that is on the major rescue tender. That major rescue tender is expected to cost around £650,000, but it's in there's milestone payments associated with that and the build process. So the majority of that spend is actually going to happen in 25-26 now. So there's around £500,000 of rephase on the premises programme as a result of that. Paragraph 5.5 just talks really around the other elements of the rephase. So the programme originally assumed we were going to spend £400,000 on Type B appliances. This would have been to purchase 3 or 4 Type B appliances, and then again, they're milestone payments, so it would have been the initial down payments on them. In line with the fleet strategy that we've talked about earlier today, the kind of replacement plan has been reviewed, and in light of that review, those replacements haven't taken place yet, so they've been rephased into future years as well. The final element of this fleet capital programme was a kind of general fleet replacement strategy pot. So again, because the fleet replacement strategy was under review, we allocated a number knowing that we'd have to buy and replace certain things, but not knowing exactly what that would look like at the time the budget was set. We are expecting to spend just over half of that, which is on the hovercraft replacement, so there'll be another £200,000 that's rephased and reconsidered in future capital programmes. The control capital programme, so paragraphs 5.6 and 5.7, 5.6 particularly talks about what we've spent money on and what we're planning to spend money on for the full year. And 5.7 talks around there's a rephase there of £230,000. So we allocated £230,000 for the ISDN PTSN project, which is to do with the 999 phone lines. That does still need to happen. The dates got changed slightly, but it's part of the capital programme for 25-26 now, so that's another rephase. Moving on to page 70 and the balance sheet reporting, so starting on paragraph 5.11. This, as I said, is the second time that we've brought an extract of the balance sheet to this committee. It's part of looking at adopting SIP for best practice and reviewing the balance sheet on a more regular basis. what we presented in Appendix 2, which I think was on page 77, is just an extract of the balance sheet. So it gives you a balance sheet as at the end of the prior financial year, so the 31st of March 2024, and then as at the end of November 2024 as well. There are some movements there that I've explained, mainly around pension, timings of pension payments and things, and the cash increase. This balance sheet will become more important to review in future when we take on more borrowing. So the borrowing line you can see there, 7 million, hasn't changed. We haven't taken any more new borrowing at the moment, but we are going to have to take on new borrowing to fund the capital programme next year. So looking at that balance sheet and how that borrowing impacts that balance sheet will become more important in the future. And then the final part of my paper today is the quarterly review of the prudential and treasury management indicators. So the first few paragraphs of this section talk around the kind of requirements that are in place around prudential indicators. So we set them once a year at the beginning of the year, but they can be reviewed and revised at any time and brought back to committee for approval. We are supposed to review them regularly and bring that to committee, which is what we're now doing from this financial year. What we have done is reviewed the prudential indicators that were set as part of the budget setting process. We've reviewed them in light of the capital programme view that we have for the current financial year now, so based on the information that is in Appendix 1. Paragraph 5.18, there's a few bullet points in there that just talk around the main movements and the reasons for those movements when we compare the indicators that were set with the indicators that we have revised based on the most up-to-date information. The key thing to note here is that the changes have been relatively insignificant. When we're looking at indicators, we're looking at checking that our capital plans are affordable, sustainable and prudent. So the fact that we're rephasing spend into the future means that our borrowing is becoming further into the future. So we're not looking at breaching anything at the moment. Breaching would happen if we were borrowing more than we expected or borrowing earlier than we expected, spending more than we thought we would, and we're not in that position. So at the moment, we're not expected to breach. We haven't breached any yet, and we're not expecting to breach any for the full financial year. So paragraph 5.21 at the bottom of page 71 just confirms that we're presenting these updated indicators for you today for review, but we're not proposing that any updated indicators need to be reviewed for the current financial year due to the kind of relatively small changes and the fact that they're moving things to the right rather than bringing anything forwards. I think that's the end of my presentation, so happy to take any questions.
Any questions, members? Councillor May.
I'm just going to go local for a minute about Bath, because obviously it's a key part of our forward development in capital terms. I just really want to throw a compliment out to the Chief Fire Officer, because we had the presentation here, I don't know whether it was last time or the time before, and the issue around the planning side of that location, it is very clear that contact has been made with local councillors there, and I can see why that deferment is there in terms of timing, because it's going to be a really, really sensitive site that's got to be developed. But I think the plans that I've seen really protecting the facade, and I know that at the moment there's a talk about getting it listed, which I think would be really, really sad if that happened. But I think from another point of view of actually pushing forward with that, that I think you've made really good steps in actually making that initial contact. So I think that's really positive. So thank you very much for doing that.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor May. We met with the council leader and local councillor to show them the proposals for Bath. I think was helpful because there was some misconceptions around the height and design, etc. So that was helpful. But we also plan to do something similar with the community. So sometime in either February or March, we haven't set a date yet, but invite other local councillors and also members of the community to come and see and talk to us about the plans and the proposals for Bath, which I hope will also go some way to reassure our local community in why we need to do that, but what it might look like into the future. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Councillor Payne.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm also going to go a bit local, and I'm going to ask about the hovercraft. I don't really understand the timing of it, because it says that 86,000 is going to be spent this year, and it's got it looks like 250,000 going. So I think that's going into future years. So what's the timing for that, and when is it actually going to be purchased?
Yes, that initial spend is for the actual hovercraft itself. but what the major expense is the vehicle to carry it on. Because the vehicle we've got currently, I believe, is 1983, so it's extremely old. And that is a bigger expense, is the vehicle to carry it on. Part of the fleet strategy that we spoke about earlier, what we're actually looking at now is the possibility of buying a second-hand vehicle, because the mileage it does is very, very low, rather than spend out what we've been quoted so far, but about 180,000 to carry it, for the vehicle to carry it on. So, which is why initially we budgeted 500,000 for the replacement, but we're trying to actually get both those inside the £200,000 envelope. But the vehicle that we've currently got won't do the job. So by the time, the reason we're going to next year is because the hovercraft won't be delivered till then, so we won't have to buy that vehicle till then. So we've got to pay for the hovercraft now, but we won't actually be paying for the vehicle to carry it on until the new financial year.
So they will actually arrive at the same time, will they?
Yes, yeah.
Although we're paying for them at different
No, that's right, yeah.
Okay.
We've had to pay for the hovercraft up front before it's built. But obviously the vehicle, you can buy it off the shelf more or less.
Councillor Payne, I fully recommend, if you haven't already, visiting Western Fire Station and seeing the hovercraft. It's and the vehicle is something to see. It's interesting.
There will be a little show on the Antiques Roadshow soon.
Yes. Any further questions, members? In that case, I have just one on the 4 on-call stations, which I missed in the papers. Which stations were receiving improvements? Do we?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I'd have to refer to Patrick. I can follow up after the meeting if, yeah.
I'm not sure either which ones.
Okay. It'd be good to know.
Yeah, no problem. I can follow up after the meeting.
I know my local station's been asking some, so it'd be good to know. Thank you very much. Yes.
I know that from Patrick, Head of Property, there is now a complete programme for all stations. Great. So not only will be able to tell you what's next, but it'll be able to give the whole programme of every station involved when they're due.
That'd be great to see, and I'm sure frontline fire staff will certainly appreciate that. Councillor May.
Thank you. Can I just ask what a Type B appliance is? As a councillor, I'm not quite certain. And the other thing was, if we're 2.8 billion underspend, but we're sticking to the programme, that doesn't mean to say that we could bring forward the purchase of vehicles, because we've just dealt with, if you like, the strategy behind the vehicles. I mean, is there any opportunity to bring forward expenditure on vehicles?
So the Type B appliance is what you would see on the road, frontline fire engine. So we call it Type B. So it's one that's very familiar to yourself, with the lockers on the side, and you see the 4 or 5 firefighters within that vehicle itself. So that's what we refer to as Type B. The actual capital programme, we have a fleet replacement programme, and we're dictated some by the procurement process, some by the availability of the manufacturer, because it's only limited, so when they can slot us into a build window, which may alter our capital spend time frames that we initially set out, because it's a little bit right. Professional judgment is we think that we can have them by this stage, this stage, this stage, and there's several stages from that. But also some of those reasons why there's been some underspend is because of the strategy and that review of, are we spending the money in the right places, and can we find some efficiencies which will reduce the overall capital spend and potentially reduce the amount of capital borrowing. So it's prudent that the fleet manager is being able to look at all of that, pushed a couple of decisions slightly to the right whilst that review takes place, aligned to his strategy as well. Okay.
Thank you, members, and thank you, Verity, for both those reports. Thank you. So the recommendation for this item is this committee is asked to note the 2024-2025 current position shown in Appendix 1 and to review the key issues within the updates provided. B is note the summary balance sheet presented in Appendix 2 and update on the prudential and treasury management indicators figures presented in Appendix 3. Thank you very much. Moving on to the agenda item 11, which is approval of the internal dispute resolution policy, which is IDRP for pensions, and Amanda is going to present.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, quite a short paper for your members on this. So, As the summary explains, an IDRP, an internal dispute resolution policy, is something which is used to resolve any pension disputes. And basically, if you're in receipt of a pension or you're denied some sort of benefit under a pension, or a discretion that you've asked for to be applied to your pension, then you have an appeals process, and that's called the IDRP. So this policy has been drafted. It's at Appendix 1 for you. And basically what it does is it follows the LGA best practice. So if I refer you, please, to Section 5 of the report on page 82. So you'll see at 5.1 we gave you the link to the LGA fact sheet, and that guidance was agreed by the LGA in consultation with the Firefighters Pensions England Scheme Advisory Board. So it's their recommended best practice as well, as explained in 5.1. So what we've done basically is taken the wording in that best practice and used it to create our own policy document, because the pensions regulator expects us to have our own policy document dealing with this process. Now, the only thing that's unique to us is how we deal with appeals. So it's a two-stage process. So in our process, stage 1 is determined by the Chief Fire Officer, Chief Executive. And then if the person is dissatisfied with the outcome at stage 1, they do have the option to then pursue it further to stage 2, and that would be a subcommittee, which is a minimum of 3 elected members of this committee, because you have in your terms of reference responsibility for pension matters. So the policy itself is not at all controversial, because the wording, as I say, matches the best practice. What I can do is also update you, which I should have said at the beginning, that the local pension board met last week and they've already reviewed this document for you. Now, there's a slight complication with dates of dispatch. So the date of dispatch of this report had to happen before the LPB meeting took place. So, Ron, I think you were at that meeting? Yes. So the feedback I've received, Councillor Payne as well. So the feedback I've received is you've already looked at it, you're happy with it, and there were no recommendations made to change it or edit it in any way. Okay. Thank you very much. So I'm asking in my recommendations, please, because it is a gap, we should have one of these in place, so the sooner it's in place, the better, that please review and approve the IDR policy at Appendix 1 for formal adoption. I'm not a pensions expert, but I will do my best to answer your questions if you've got any. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Any questions, members? Councillor May?
No, it's just one simple question about the trade unions. If this has gone through all our processes, has it been consulted and worked with the trade unions?
What we do at the local pension board is slightly different. So it's not automatically trade unions, but basically you have 2 employer reps on the local pension board, which is councillors. So you've got councillors Payne and Hardy, but you have 2 employee scheme member reps. Now, it normally falls that those jobs are fulfilled by an FBU rep, but it might also be some other scheme member who's not a member of the union. So it's at that board that they have an opportunity to comment on anything regarding pensions. And then the recommendations of that board, because they're not a decision-making body, they're a scrutiny body, then come to this committee for adoption. So yes, there has been a process going through LPB where those, I think they are union reps at the moment. One of them is, certainly. So there's 2 scheme member reps. One of them's a union rep, and that input has been sought already. Okay.
The question is, there's going to be no dispute about the dispute programme?
I think it's welcomed. I'd be surprised if it isn't, because it's best practice. So I no reason. And also what I can say is, in my tenure as clerk and monitoring officer, I've helped handle a couple of these. They're very rare, and they've always been resolved very quickly. So I don't think I've ever had to stand up a panel, for example. It's always been dealt with at a low level.
So if we did, the stage 2, would we provide training to members to make sure that they're...
Yes, yeah. If you in the policy itself, it says that you would get professional advice.
Right.
So we ensure that you have professional advice from the pensions advisor in the service, but also external advice if needed. So you get everything you need and HR advice at that meeting. So you're not expected to resolve it cold.
Thank you.
Effectively.
Richard, go ahead.
Just for reassurance, Councillor May, the IDRP is not for us, our own requirement. It is a requirement of the pension regulator. So it is a standard we have to apply, rather than something we've done as a service.
Thank you. Councillor Payne.
I'd just say that, yeah, we looked at this all through this policy at the local pension board, and I think we were pretty happy that it was non-controversial, that it was pretty standard, because it does follow the LGA's guidelines. So, yeah, I'm happy to propose that we just accept it as is.
Thank you. Thank you for the hand-holding, Amanda, as well. We, as councillors, we don't receive a pension. I think it's Mr. Eric Pickles may have brought in that policy, but not to be political. So we do need a bit of hand-holding when it comes to pensions sometimes, because personally I do. So the recommendation here is to review and approve the IDRP policy, Appendix 1, for adoption, which I will propose. Look for a seconder.
Councillor Payne's already proposed
Thank you.
for you.
Thank you for seconding, Councillor Payne. So votes against? Any abstentions? And votes for?
Thank you.
Thank you, members. So Amanda, agenda item 12, which is you again presenting. Thank you very much. And that's the recruitment of a new independent chair for the local pension board.
Thank you. Yes, I've agreed to present this paper as well, because I probably know as much about local pension boards as anyone, I suppose. So the local pension board is an advisory board, and it assists Avon Fire Authority in its role as scheme manager. So collectively, the Fire Authority is the scheme manager of all the firefighters' pension schemes. A while back, a decision was taken that we used to have an elected member who used to chair the local pension board, and it was quite an onerous task, because if the pension regulator wants to scrutinise performance of the board, that chair needs to be very up to date with all pension rules and regulations and so on. And we felt it was a bit of an onerous and unfair task for an elected member, even though we were offering training. So a decision was taken that we would hire in, as it's permitted under the Constitution, an independent chair for the local pension board who would be a pensions expert, so available to answer any questions at that board. The Fire Authority appointed Andy Cunningham as our first ever independent chair at their meeting on the 15th October 2021. And I understand, and I haven't been present, but I understand that meetings have worked very well, and he does ensure very good scrutiny and oversight of pension matters, which was very appreciated. Now, unfortunately, Andy's specialism normally is the local government pension scheme rather than the firefighters' pension schemes, and his workload has increased with the local government work, and that's the area of specialty he's pursuing. So he's decided, sadly, to step down as our independent chair because his workload won't permit him to do both. So I've been talking to him about this, and we agreed with the lead director at ACFO, Richard Welsh, that he would step down after the January meeting, which has just taken place, and we would run a recruitment round. So this paper is asking you to note his intention to step down, approve the appointment of a recruitment process to appoint a new chair for the local pension board, to approve the chair role and person specification, which I've tweaked and updated slightly, but not very much, to Appendix 1, and approve the draft advert, Appendix 2, which would go live tomorrow. If I quickly draw your attention to paragraph 3.3, in the background sections, just to let you know, I didn't put it in the papers, but your constitution at the end of the pension board terms of reference has an Annex A, and it tells us how we must run this process. So it's not that I haven't made this up, it's from your own terms of reference, okay? So I have to follow that process. So I have to advertise the role, we have to formally shortlist, and have a panel interview for that role. So that will be the process that we follow, okay? If I can also refer you to paragraph 5.1 on page 93. The pensions expert would assist in understanding of law relating to pensions and knowledge of pensions, public sector pensions and processes. Importantly, at 5.2, they're non-voting. So they literally ensure that the meeting goes well and give advice and give opinion and scrutinise. They do not vote, and voting takes place by the 2 employer and 2 employee scheme representatives. At paragraph 5.3, I've set out the timeline I'm intending to follow. So it is planned that the advert will go live tomorrow with a closing date of the 20th of February. There will be a link available, so if you know any pensions experts who are looking for a role, I really encourage you to circulate that link. They're hard to find, these people, so please help us search. We will be shortlisting the week commencing the 24th of February, and the interview date, actually, we've now set since I published this paper, so we're going for Friday, the 7th of March, so that's the only change there. Now, there is one change I would need to update you on after the meeting at the local pension board last week. It came to light last week that one of the scheme member representatives sadly had to decide to step down for personal reasons. So I do now need to recruit one of those as well. So it's sort of all, it never rains, it pours, doesn't it? So we've got to find one of those. So I can inform you that at your terms of reference in Annex A, there's also a section on how to appoint a new member representative. So I'm going to be cheeky to save me writing another paper and ask that we add a recommendation to this one. I'm going to read it to you and see if you feel comfortable with it. So it would be recommendation E, that the committee is asked to note the need to recruit a new scheme member representative and authorise the clerk to follow the appointment procedure set out in the local pension board terms of reference. So if you feel comfortable with that, it is slightly less involved. It is a voluntary role, it's unpaid. We'd just literally be reaching out to members of the pension scheme and saying, would you like to volunteer to attend 2 meetings a year to represent yourself and other pension scheme members? And sometimes we don't get very many nominations, in which case it's not a very complicated selection process, but hopefully we'll have more this time, so we'll see. So with your approval, please, I'd ask for you to consider the recommendations, but with that added recommendation E, which I'm happy to read out again if anyone wants me to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Any questions? I'm going to go run for a change first to Councillor Hardy, and then Councillor May.
Thank you so much. I'd just like to say it's just the opportunity that Andy Cunningham is a really, really good pensions independent chair. And I assume, and I'm guessing that Amanda's talked to Andy about the possibility of him knowing anyone that would like to apply for this position. But he has been, I mean, I've only done 3 or 4 meetings, but he's been very, very good, and he's switched on and gave me all the information I wanted. So, yeah, very good indeed. So, thanks to Andy.
Andy's agreed 2 things, actually, Ron, which I should have mentioned. One is he agreed to do a handover, so he's agreed to stay in post a bit longer beyond the meeting last week to help us. Well, not that long, unfortunately, but he's agreed to help us on the interview panel so we get the right calibre of person. He's agreed to help us with any questions between now and getting a new person, but he's also agreed to circulate the link with the advert to all his networks. So he's doing everything he can to help us. Yeah.
Councillor May.
Yeah. If that's the case, Andy has in effect been responsible to this committee. I think it would be appropriate for us to, as a committee, to say thank you and record that back to him, because if it's a voluntary role, then it's really great credit to him for doing it.
He's paid. It's the member representatives that are voluntary,
well,
but yes, he's done a very good job. So I think it's still appropriate.
So if we could feed that back, I think that would be really important. Can I just ask? You said that he was really good, but in the person spec, personal commitment to high standards. There's 2 things that struck me. Is how do we know that that's actually the case? Because the measurements of that performance, we've set the standards, but how do we know as a committee that those standards are being achieved? And the second thing is that it doesn't actually say that I could see anywhere where it says there's no personal risk to that person's finances in taking on that role.
I think that's probably because it's an advisory board, not a decision-making board.
Right.
So I think that would be the link to the legal risk. So I think that's probably why. I think that's why that's a distinction. In relation to personal commitment to high standards of and governance, I think it was because we'd never had one before. We hadn't asked the independent chair to sign up to a code of conduct. But I think we ought to consider that the way that would be tested is we say to them, look, a member's code of conduct applies to members. Are you happy to sign to abide by that? And then, of course, that personal commitment is then people could then report to me as clerk if there's anything that causes them concern. So it's the commitment to high standards is really during their tenure. I can't test it until they're in post. Does that make sense?
No, I'm really happy with that. I'm not saying I'm unhappy with that. It's just, as a committee, how do we judge that?
Well,
that would just be
in terms of behaviours. Yes. So if ever I receive a complaint about anyone, I follow the code of conduct arrangements. Which are set out, which are part of your constitution. It would only ever get to a panel of the audit committee. That's where it goes to members. Right. It never comes back to PLC anyway. Okay. Code of conduct's never dealt with by PLC. It's always the audit committee that deal with that.
Thank you.
Right.
I think, Councillor May, the fact that we've got two authority members on the local pension board as well will give you another avenue of a balance and check there.
Councillor Payne.
Yeah, I agree with the comments made that Andy Cunningham has been really good and he's been very helpful to us as members. So, I hope that we do put on record our thanks to him. It's definitely been worthwhile to have an independent chair who's got an expertise in public sector pensions. So, for me, I think the most important thing on the spec is the fact that the person should have good knowledge of public sector pensions and regulations and so on. I think that's the most important thing that we need to cover.
To be honest, I think that's why Andy's going to be on the selection panel to test that, because we're all non-pension experts, and to have someone who is, they will be able to probe whether that person really does have that knowledge.
Thank you, members. Thank you, Amanda. And as Vice Chair today, I will add my personal thanks to Andy Cunningham for all his work he's done as the local, as the independent Chair for the Local Pensions Board since 2021. Councillor May.
Sure, that's a formal minute of the committee, as well as your personal. Thank you.
Emma's taking the minutes, yeah, that's fine.
Thank you, Councillor May. So, as Amanda's already read the recommendations, I won't repeat them, but I will propose them and seek a seconder. Councillor Payne or Councillor May? Councillor May, do everything this time. Councillor Payne will. Thank you very much for seconding. So, any votes against? Any abstentions? And votes for. Thank you, members.
Thank you, and Emma, I'll give you that extra wording for the so don't panic.
Agenda item 13 is the agree/monitor procurement forward plan 250k to £1 million. Snapshot date 17th of January 2025. And Tanya, I believe you're presenting.
I am, thank you, Chair. So this is my regular spreadsheet that gives you a bit of a heads up and progress on procurement pipelines. It can be quite fluid, as you would have heard. The fleet strategy has been agreed, so some of these things might come on and off or change names. But as usual, I'm happy to receive any questions. And the item in yellow is anything that's above £1 million would come to this board for approval before we go out to procure. That is not after we've been to procure. So should we go and purchase rescue pumps, we will be coming to this board for approval to do that. Any questions, always happy to receive them, but I don't very often get any for this bit. It's
Any
usually
questions,
for
members?
information.
Brilliant. That one is just for scrutiny. It's fine, Councillor May. You don't have to ask a question on absolutely everything, but brilliant. That was merely for scrutiny, so I don't have a recommendation in front of me, so we'll move on.
Just for noting.
Thank you. So, agenda item 14, which is the approval of the draft IT strategy. Tom will be presenting. I do have to note, mention to members to please note the strategy itself, Appendix 1, is exempt, and the details can only be discussed in the exempt session. So, any questions on this can please be held over to that exempt session, but Tom will still be presenting the report as that is public. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I appreciate both papers, the exempt one and the public one. They're quite word heavy, so I'm just going to summarise the key points for them now, open up to any questions that you may have for both the open and shut sessions. So the draft IT strategy was presented to the Avon Fire Service Leadership Board back in November 2024. Now this report reflects findings from a 90-day review conducted by myself as the new head of IT, with a core focus on people, process and tools. Those areas were evaluated in alignment with my professional opinion alongside HMIC FRS priorities and the new Fire Standards Board digital and cyber standards. I use this to create a comprehensive IT strategy that is intrinsically linked to the Avon Fire and Rescue Service Plan. Now, the strategy itself focuses on 6 strategic themes. So, excelling in operational excellence, that's how the IT team carry out its day-to-day duties. Delivering outstanding user experiences, so that's making sure that the 950 people that we employ as a service can actively consume the services that IT provide to them. Ensuring that we have the highest levels of security. The IT world changes on a daily basis. We want to get on the front foot and make sure that everything that we have is as safe and secure as it possibly can be. Operating with financial precision. It's kind of no hidden thing that IT costs a lot of money, and we need to be making sure that we are spending the right amount in the right places with at least duplication of cost as we can possibly do, and that we change to a manner of operating at the forefront of innovation and use data to drive each decision that we make. Now, Rich mentioned this as part of the fleet strategy. As an organisation, we collect a lot of data, and there is so much analytics that we can pull from that help decide how we better protect and serve our communities, how we better spend the cash that we do have, and how we can provide better experiences to the staff that we have. That kind of leads on to the last strategic theme of empowering users to deliver a digital future. Now, by that I mean historic IT may be seen as kind of people shut in a shut room from an IT perspective that don't like to speak to any other human. They just deliver services that they think are fit, but they may not match the expectations of modern world. What we want to try and do here is lay the guardrails and enable the service to consume technology, but become enablers too, not just focus on a small IT team for the service to come up with all of the innovation for the company, but give safe, secure, sustainable platforms that the organisation can also help us grow, but will have the guardrails in place to make sure that is done in an efficient manner. So those themes overall are about strengthening IT leadership, centralising the IT governance that we have, prioritising our user experience, looking at process improvements to standardise IT governance, enhance the compliance and transform business processes. Then from a tools perspective, just looking to reduce the technical debt that we hold. Now, technical debt just means things that we've bought maybe too long ago and sweated those assets for too long that we need to transform into a more modern, secure, sustainable way of working. That includes our infrastructure, the applications that we have, how those applications talk to each other, and how that then drives that innovation and database themes, whilst introducing those real-time data capabilities to support the organisation's goals. Now, the outcomes that we set to achieve in this strategy whilst they include reducing and managing the risk described in CR 6, 12 and 13 that I believe we may have seen in the past, the actual outcomes of the IT strategy, what we want to be seeing from this is a centralisation of the IT services within Avon Fire. We want to be providing good user experiences, delivering successful projects, holding centralised IT governance across the organisation, digitising our business processes. That's not simply taking something that we have today, putting that into a modern format, but actually reworking how we work as an organisation to best fit the modern technology and tools that are available to us, enhancing how we manage our suppliers, using data a lot more to drive our decision making, and ultimately look to morph the technical debt that we hold as an organisation into technical wealth, providing that real-time data flows through our service. Now, the 2025-2026 budget process is being finalised based on the latest estimates that we have. Now, we do expect a small increase in capital requirements to address those past underinvestments and potentially rising revenue costs due to growing subscription models. By that, I mean in the past with IT, 80 to 90% of it would be capital-based spend. However, the market has seen a shift to more cloud-based services that turn to a subscription model, and then for our terms, that turns into revenue. I've recently introduced a more detailed budgeting process that kind of splits out on a granular line-by-line basis what we're spending as an organisation, what theme we can put that against, what category we can put that against. Is there something better that we can do with that spend? I've spent a long time speaking to Verity about that, and we've gone through that in great detail, but we're confident that we've got a good overview of our IT spend, and that is going to be discussed, I believe, in future integration to the authority's budget planning process. I'm going to stop there and obviously invite any questions that we can answer in the open session or any after that.
I think it may be prudent to save any questions for the exempt sessions unless members want to indicate they have no questions and they're happy to approve. Is that Councillor May?
Just one question, Chair. Why is it in exempt session?
I think in that case, Councillor, we will save that for the exempt session.
Okay.
It will become clear once we reach that. Thank you.
Oh, right. So, yeah, it's a good question. I'm reading it, there's nothing in there that couldn't be public.
Councillor May, yeah, we will come back to that very shortly. Thank you, Tom, but obviously we will continue in a second. So the agenda item 15, the date of the next meeting is Wednesday, the 16th of April, 2025. It will begin at 10:30 sharp, be held here at Severn Park. Thank you very much. We will now start the exclusion of the press and public. So the chair will resolve that the public be excluded from the meeting during the following items of the business on the grounds that they contain exempt information pursuant to Schedule 12A, Part 1 of the Local Government Act 1972, and that in accordance with Schedule 12A, Part 2, Paragraph 10 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing information. I will propose, can I seek a seconder, please, to exempt the public? Thank you, Cal. Thank you. Votes against? Any abstentions? Votes in favour? Is that an abstention, Councillor May?
So two abstentions.
Two abstentions. Okay. Thank you.
That's carried.
Thank you.